All right, you can go
Okay.
ahead, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Iris Nakunate. You can call me Awula, which translates into lady. I'm the executive director of Resilient Sisters Ghana. Resilient Sisters Ghana is an LBQGNC gender non-conforming persons organization that caters for queer people and marginalized women as a whole. We do health, we do sexual consent, we do gender-based violence, and also economical empowerment for queer women. So that's who Iris is. If there is any question, I'm ready to answer. Nice to meet you all once again.
Yeah, and thanks for agreeing to come speak with us on such short notice. This is the end of the year with a lot of tight deadlines and trying to end up activities for the year as an organization. So thanks for creating the time.
Thank you too for having me. Thank you very much. Anything for the
Okay. Yeah, anything for the movement. So we were when we thought about the 16 days activism against gender-based violence, as usual, we try to place ourselves as situate ourselves as an organization working with queer people in the region. And we were looking at what this means for us and what it has historically meant for us contextually. And it was evident that within the mainstream gender-based violence initiatives, the funding space, the ideation space, conversations, implementations of solutions, policies, there is always this binarized default. Even within the feminist framework for combating gender-based violence, there is always this. There's no inclusion for queer women, LBQ women, for trans persons, for intersex persons. And that just takes away the impact of collective gender-based violence as a whole, because feminist frameworks, feminist solutions are supposed to provide a forum and a center place for equality. And there is no how gender-based violence will end if everything is binarized for cis heteronormativity. So that was the theory of change we were working with when programming for this conversation. And I think I'll just start with a question. As someone who has worked with the community, with the LBKOGNZ community for quite a while now, how has the context for gender-based violence been when in response, in prevention, and even policies? How has that landscape looked like, both within the community, which is ordering, and also in the mainstream framework?
Okay. Thank you very much for the question. So I'm going to start within the community because that's where the problem is. When gender-based violence happens in the community, feminists worldwide or nationwide hardly speaks on it because, quote and unquote, they can't relate to lesbian, bisexuals, or trans people, queer women being sexually violent towards each other. We mostly speak on our own issues. We don't get people speaking with us. Unlike when it's outside the community, heterosexual people, heterosexual women get abused. You find queer feminists standing with them in solidarity, speaking on their issues, calling out the perpetrators. But then when it comes to the community, we don't get people to do that for us. And it's hard because even with the community, one, there is a bill in Ghana right now, anti-LGBT bill in Ghana, which makes it hard for anybody to go and report because what are you going to report? What are you going to say? So people end up getting away with abuse. intimate partner abuse, any kind of abuse towards the peer community, people end up getting away with it because the police that is supposed to protect you, the victim, would end up stigmatizing you, would end up turning the whole narrative around about you being queer and not someone abusing you in any way. So when it happens, it stays in the community. Organizational heads get to talk about it, and then that's just it. So within the community, it's hard. It's really hard because people don't get to I don't know which word to use, but people don't get to be punished for the crime that they commit against their fellow women, right? They tend to get away with it all the time. Whilst when you go like outside the community, like I said, people, if a man is hitting a woman, obviously we know what happens. When feminists come together and then speak up, we know what happens. They get the punishment that they deserve. So the law works on their behalf. And then that's the privilege that a heterosexual woman will have against a queer woman. You understand? So with the community in Ghana right now, what we do most of the time is try to put together consent workshops as much as possible. We try to do workshops on gender-based violence. We try to let those people know that it's not right to hit your partner, hit your friend. It doesn't matter who the person is to you. It is just not right. Because that is what we can do for now. For now, where we are right now in Ghana, that's the only thing we can do. Because even when somebody is bold enough to go to the police station and say, listen, this person is my partner and she hit me or they hit me, the police is not going to focus on what has been done to her. What they are going to focus on is on her sexuality. So people will not go. There are a lot of queer women who don't even talk about the abuse they go through, the intimate partner abuse that they go through. They don't talk about it. Right, because it feels like, oh, if you're dating your fellow woman, how is she hitting you, or how are they hitting you? It's not even possible, but it's possible, and it happens a lot. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing that insight. Tawakalit, good afternoon. Thanks for finally joining us. So sorry for the technical hitches.
It's all right. I mean, we expect it at this point. Hi, Marlene. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon.
Yeah, welcome. Good afternoon. So we were just trying to first of all, can we get to know you a bit about your work?
Okay, sure, of course. My name is Khalid Kareem. I'm a feminist and I work in the field of sexual and gender-based violence. I've been in this field for the past 5 years. My most recent, I've worked with a sexual assault referral center. That's actually how my works in the sector started from. My most recent project, which we started last year, was building an interactive voice response solution for survivors of sexual and gender-based violence across Lagos and Borno states, so they can get the information, support, and actual medical care and psychosocial support that they needed. For this project, we targeted majorly, I mean, everybody was welcome, but we targeted majorly women, girls, and gender and sexual minorities. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thanks for creating the time to come share with us today. When we were thinking about this conversation, we were trying to look at how outside the scope of gender binary and heterosexual power relations, feminist frameworks don't exactly capture what sexual and gender-based violence means in its entirety if they exclude how it interplays for LBQ, GNZ people, how it expresses and presents itself for lesbians, for queer women, for trans persons, for intersex persons, because there is this otherness that if it's not women and girls traditionally mainstreamed, binarized, then it is not included in programming, it is not included in interventions. I'm so glad you mentioned that one of the projects you've worked on also took this in consideration. How has that landscape been like? I can imagine it's not something that is common. How has it been to try to be inclusive in that way?
I mean, I see that Alexandra Maduago is on this call. So we actually partnered with them in terms of the Initiative for Equal Rights as our partners to respond to GBV in LGBTQI+ community. Hi, Alex. I hope you're well. So, so for example, in Nigeria and in much of Africa, I dare to say we all know what the binary is as regards to sex and gender, right? So when we wanted to do the project, it's called the Open Arms Project. I know that there were a lot of concerns around language. Even when we had the stakeholders meeting, for example, and of course, we invited all of our partners. I think Alex actually represented Tears at that meeting. And when they started to talk about how we affected specifically the LGBTQI community, I can say for a fact that a lot of the audience were quite uncomfortable. Like, did you people bring us here to push an agenda? What's this about? And I think for me, where it would start with is, and why did we even have to partner with TES in particular? We partnered with the Borno State Ministry of Women Affairs. We partnered with Mirabel Center and we partnered with Chechayara. And we specifically had to partner with Mirabel Center with TS because it was important to us that we did not bring more harm to people in our bid to provide a solution by sending them to organizations that, while we can confidently say that they respond well to cases of violence against women and girls, we could not beat our chest and say we're certain that it would respond just as well to gender and sexual minorities, which is why TEARS was an important partner in that project for us. And I think that, it's easy to say, oh, these organizations they are non-inclusive, it's terrible, and it is terrible. But personally, I feel like where we need to start, because these organizations also work within the framework of Nigeria as a system, now talking strictly for our own realities as Nigerians. So they can only expand as far as the society allows them to. So I know that there are organizations that we spoke with and we said, oh, we're trying to respond to this person, this person, this person. And they were like, you know what, you can refer anybody to us. We don't have a problem. As long as they are survivors, we're happy to receive them, but you cannot use that language. Do you see that? So in terms of even providing the right services, they didn't have any issue with that. The issue was that they didn't want the language that came along with it because they didn't want it to, because it was like, oh, so it doesn't seem as if, no, we're trying to encourage. Do you see? And that's a problem for them because we operate in a system where they can be punished, right, for that. So for me, the very first place to start with, and even when we had our design workshop, so when you think about this, there's also the age and generational gap that exists. I'm not saying that all young people are inclusive, and are intersectional in their activism and advocacy. Far from it. But when you think about the numbers in terms of younger people and older people, then you find that the older generation have more of an issue with relearning and unlearning and just being inclusive in the work that you do. Because when I think about the audience that we had at our design workshop, there we had Remy, the ED of TF, and we had Alex at the stakeholders meeting. When I think about the conversations that we had, they were starkly different in both groups. And the major difference was that for the stakeholders workshop, for example, we had more older people. So people from ministries, from the National Human Rights Commission, they were much older. So for them, it was like, what are you people talking about? But for the design workshop, we had younger people from across the different organizations that we invited. Anita was at that one. So the conversations flowed better. People made mistakes. I'm going to admit that because a lot of us are just learning, right? We're just expanding our knowledge base. So people made mistakes, but they were very quick to apologize, and you could see that they were not trying to come from a place of harm, and they were very open to learning more about new stuff. So I just stopped there at this time.
Thank you. I think from what both you and Iris have shared, even contextualized to Ghana and Nigeria, one of the key themes I'm picking up is the otherness, right? The otherness, and within the feminist response generally to sexual and gender-based violence, there is already that otherness of, hey, we don't want to platform LBQLTI plus issues or persons because, hey, we're not an LBQLTI plus organization. So it's not like everybody here is a woman, everybody here is gender non-binary, everybody here is a survivor who needs, or a victim who needs our services or response. There is this question of who the person is from language. And this is good that it came up because when we were conceptualizing for this, one of the conversations we had was how a lot of all these conversations start with language. We're having the 16 days activism against gender-based violence. And of course, the team carries women and girls. Already, creating exclusionary tendencies that people would work, and it's a global campaign, so everybody would work within that framework. It gives that laxity to, hey, this is what we are programming and looking at. So that will bring me to my next question, Iris. In your opinion, what are the initial steps we can take as someone who has worked both within the women's rights movement, and you also run an LBKO-GNZ organization? What are the frameworks we can start looking at, the ABCs we can start looking at to tackle the first issue of otherness in response to SGBV? Because if we don't start from there, I don't see where the intersections would even start connecting.
Okay, so for me, I think we should start within ourselves. We need to understand that it's not okay. It's never okay for anyone to go through the things that we put our partners through or our friends through, right? We need to be able to educate ourselves. We need to unlearn and relearn the things that society has taught us. We need to get to the point that we will say we don't want to be like our parents or our aunties, our fathers, our mothers, the things we saw them do to their wives or their girlfriends, that we felt it's okay to do. Because also most of the time we attach masculinity to violence. Masculinity is equal to violence. So I'm masculine and you're feminine and you do something, I need to hit you. I think we need to start from there. Then after, we can start with the stakeholders, that's the police officers, right? We need to get some of them as allies. We need to have meetings with them. We need to educate them on how to handle our issues. We need to make them understand, because then when they understand, and then an issue of abuse, gender-based violence abuse is reported at a particular station or an ally officer, they will know how to handle it. You understand? Then we will also need to go into the community, outside the community, to the mainstream community. That's what I'm talking about. To let people know that the fact that you think a man hates a woman doesn't mean women also don't hate women. Because most of the time, when couples come out, like queer couples come out and one say this person hate me, you go to the comment section and then you find people laughing about it. Because it doesn't matter whether it's a man or a woman and a woman. There is a power struggle somewhere. There is that power struggle is always there. When two people are together, that power struggle is always there. So we need to start first with ourselves in community, outside community, and then the stakeholders, that's the police officers that are meant to uphold the laws. We need to start with these people. That's how we can move, and then move to another step.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. The work starts within, and to start, first of all, redefining how violence is not just, masculinity is not the only identification of GBV, and how it can also occur in other dynamics, power relations. That will bring me to Tawakalit. I know you have worked a bit around a lot actually around the policy space. Now I know you work in Nigeria primarily, but you've also like contextualized and done your work beyond the shores of Nigeria. So I'm asking, how can existing GBV interventions or frameworks be worked upon to be more inclusive of LGBTI persons? Like, are there frameworks we can explore? How can we even begin that kind of integration, considering what policy frameworks look like and the context we're working in, which are mostly restrictive for most countries in West Africa to begin with?
Thank you very much, Marlene. So I'd like to say that, first of all, so in 2021, I represented a coalition of civil society organizations where we made recommendations to the 9th Senate on changes to be made to the 1999 Constitution of Nigeria. And we focused on 3 major parts. So as it relates to youth, persons with disabilities, and women. And I remember that when we had that meeting somewhere in Abuja, some of us were trying to push our luck a little bit and then saying, oh, could we just include some language that was more expansive and reflected the realities of sexual and gender identities? And you would have thought that we asked them to chew nails with the way they descended on us. You young people, that's what we always say. You people are always bringing agenda into everything. And, imagine two people in a room of 20 people. It's like, okay. And but here's the thing. A lot of them were older. I was the youngest in that room. No, there was a younger person. I was the second youngest. But what I remember beyond the people that shut us down and were like, oh, every time we're always trying to push agenda as young people, was that there were older people who, I'm going to admit, they didn't say it where the other people could hear. But like when we broke up for tea and for lunch, there were at least two older people who came and said, you know what you people are not saying, what you people are saying is not wrong, but maybe this is not the right time to say it. And there's a problem with that where I agree in terms of when we're talking about the human rights of people, when is the right time then to speak about human rights? And when do we put our feet down and say, you know what, enough of this goal shifting? When are you people going to be comfortable enough to bring this conversation to the table? So there's definitely a problem with that. But the way people said that, you know what, the way to win with these people is to take it slowly. So we had someone who had been the chief of staff for the Senate speaker in the room, just to provide advisory and stuff like that. And they were saying that the thing about activists and advocates is that we want 100% of the things that we want 100% of the time, right? I remember when the Senate tossed out the gender bills, and I mean, a lot of us rightly went to the street, and people were angry, and people were sad, and people felt like it meant that all of the work that we had done did not matter. I wasn't sad. I mean, I was sad that they threw out the bill, but I didn't feel hopeless. I think that's the right word. Because for me, the fact that they threw out the bill and the conversations that it brought up meant that people were asking questions. People that knew nothing about the bill. People started asking, okay, I've been seeing this bring back something on my status, you make the constitution inclusive of women. What is it about? What are you talking about? And then we tell them things like, oh, the constitution does not allow a Nigerian woman to pass her nationality to her husband, but a Nigerian man can. And even though some of the most, narrow-minded persons were like, okay, that doesn't make any sense, So a lot of times I feel like the place that we start from, because when you think about policy in Nigeria and in West Africa, humans make policy. So policy is not made in some dark room by some machines. It is humans that sit together and say, you know what, here are the things that we want to pass through. Here are the things that we want to sign up on. And when we even think about GBV, I mean, Mirabel Center started working in 2013. I started working with Mirabel Center in 2018, I believe, and then left in 2021. And at the time I started working with Mirabel Center, it was like a free-for-all for rapists and abusers on social media, especially Twitter. They would come out with their full chest and say, yes, I grabbed that boobs. What's going to happen about it? Right? There was confidence because, first of all, a lot of people were not knowledgeable about GBV. So they didn't have a lot of people countering their very harmful information and their crimes, right? A lot of people who were knowledgeable were, for some reason, ashamed because, I mean, the function of these heteronormative systems that we have is to impose shame on the person that was wronged, that harm was done to. So that's worked so well so far. But now in 2023, it's not perfect, but you agree with me that it's completely different. Now, survivors come on Twitter and say that somebody abused me. And yes, there are still the people that were praying that God will help us to give them sense, who are asking stupid questions like, what were you wearing? Why did you go to his house? But in the same vein, there are so many, many more people who are saying, how dare you? This is a crime. Call this number. Do you need my help? I'm going to follow you. There are people volunteering their resources, their homes, to house survivors to help them seek justice. Even while we might not be noticing it clearly because it's happening like in real time, change is happening, but it's taking some time. And when I think about things that bridge the gap between where we were and where we are now, a lot of it revolves around education. So if we can say that people are hateful, and some people are hateful, but a lot of people are just afraid of the things that they don't understand. And all of the created threats that they've been made to believe that poses to their own lifestyle. I mean, if you go on Twitter, or even Instagram, there's content around how, as women, if you support members of the LGBTQI community, you're giving up your own rights. You've probably come across some of them, right? Exactly. So you think about it, why would somebody support a movement that they're told and they've come to believe that takes away from their own human rights? Because there's also trauma when you think about it in terms of the way. So instead of thinking of rights as something expansive that all of us can take our piece and it's enough, because I mean, rights do not just end. It's not a finite resource that we need to fight ourselves for, that we need to struggle to get or compete with ourselves for. It's infinite. Everybody can have rights and the world would not collapse. But the way that the languaging and the education and the information around this has been spread, it's not like that. It's almost like, you know what, if this set of people have, it's the same thing with men and women when you think about it in terms of feminism. Some men attack feminism so badly because they're unable to believe that women having rights does not take away from the rights that they already have. Right? It's like if women have rights, then that's because we are giving up some of our own rights. You and I know that that's not the case, but they don't know that that's not the case. So I feel like the very first field that we need to really, really invest in is education. Because look, think about it. In 2021, I believe, when Uwela was murdered in Benin State, the Nigerian Governors Forum declared a state of emergency on gender-based violence in Nigeria. Now, I personally am not too impressed by all of these names because they give things big, big names and they don't do the work required. But at least you can say that the conversation got to some of the highest offices in the land. Even the president had to talk about it at the time. Why? Because women's rights group and the concerned groups did not shut up about it. It was like, you know what, we're here, harm is being done to us, and whether you like it or not, you are going to listen, right? So because there was more education around it, it meant that citizens could rally around it. And because citizens could rally around it, our elected officials had no choice but to begin to mainstream responses to gender-based violence into their policies and their briefs and the laws that are being made on the floor of the House. So in terms of this in particular, I would say that when it comes to communication, there is this curve that maybe I'll send to you later and we could share with the attendees of this webinar. There are certain people that when you're trying to provide education, don't bother about them because no matter what you do, you feel like hit your head on the wall. Their minds are already made up. Nothing is going to change. But in that same curve, there are people at very strategic positions where with just the right knowledge, the right information, the right education, they will come to your side. So where they are right now, they are on the side edge, and they are the majority, by the way. The loud, hateful people are the minority. They are very loud. So sometimes we wrongly believe that they are the majority and everybody's like that, and so nothing can change, but they are the minority. The majority is the silent one. There is a silent majority that we're not reaching with the right knowledge. So the silent majority is also having themselves bombarded left and right about how somebody getting rights takes away from their rights. But because generally there are people who believe in human rights, there are people who believe in equality, there are people who believe in the fact that everybody should be able to live a life of dignity, of respect, and where their rights are not trampled upon. It means that if we target these people with the right knowledge and information, if we reach them with, with data, what the science says, it's not shut up, idiot. You are a bad person, you don't believe in human rights. It's bringing data, like here's what the science says about this. I mean, there are people in Nigeria who still believe that children watching cartoon, right, is what turns their sexuality and gender. And they believe it from the deepest bottoms of their heart. So we're not educating enough. I know that we're trying, especially when you think about the fact that the organizations that are focused on rights of gender minorities and sexual minorities in Nigeria are they're not a lot. But I feel like if there's a confluence of all of these organizations coming together with allies who are not necessarily part of these organizations, then I think that we can really move the needle in terms of how we provide information. Because if we reach out to that silent majority, and that silent majority gets the right information, and it gets to a point where when a chef shares content on Twitter, other people are retweeting, other people are providing education from a place of knowledge, then the tide will begin to shift and our lawmakers will have no choice but to begin to listen to us. Right now, they are sitting very gallantly in their seats because they feel like the majority supports the restrictive policies that they currently have in place and there are no consequences for it. We began to inflict consequences for people who discarded women's rights and responses to GBV. So they sat up because as we know with these people, it's always about power. So we need to speak to them the language that they understand and hit them in the places where the consequences actually affect them. So they know that, oh, women business and there are consequences for not coming to the right side.
Thank you. That's a lot to mull over. I don't think I've personally even admitted, I don't know, that the majority are people who are willing to listen, because it just feels like the majority are those who are not willing to listen. That's a lot of food for thought. And yes, policies are made by people. So reaching the right people means getting the right influence to start changing these policies. Iris, another part of GBV that I would really like us to touch before we leave today is response, right? Because we have a couple of people on this call, myself inclusive, who work on initiatives in the mainstream that respond to GBV. How can these initiatives, these frameworks, these systems be made? How can we adjust them? How can we work on them to create safer linkages for LGBTQI plus persons who need services in response to SGBV? Like, how can we make it safer?
So that's a tough question, but not really tough, because I know in Ghana there are a few helplines for response for gender-based violence for queer people, and I also know that one of the ways that they operate is by empowering the people that will receive this calls. So the people that will be receiving these calls, in a way that they teach them about, they take them through a more form of like a counseling kind of way. So they teach them how to receive a call from someone who has gone through the traumatic experience of gender-based violence, and how to speak to them, how to affirm them. And then when it's too much for you, probably then you have to recommend them to a certified counselor, or another person who is beyond your control. I think some of the ways that we can go about it is I can't emphasize enough about having daily conversations around these things, right? Because there are a lot of people that these things happen to them, gender-based violence. They go through violence and then they don't even know. You have to sit down with them or be in a room with them before they'll be like, no, I have been through this. This thing has happened to me, but I didn't know the name to attach to what was happening to me, right? So I can't emphasize enough about having these conversations. We can't stop having these conversations. I don't think an organization should say, oh, I did workshop on gender-based violence last year, so this year I'm not going to include it in my work plan. It shouldn't be something like that, because you can't finish doing the work. That's it. You can't finish doing the work because it doesn't end. If Anita gets beaten today or gets hit today, tomorrow Joyce is going to be hidden by another person. It's happening. It's happening all the time. Sometimes it's not even in a sexual relationship. It's even family members. You understand? Beating a queer person because of their sexuality, right? And then also because of where we grew up, where we are coming from as Africans from Nigeria, Ghana, probably it will be similar. You've been told that when your parents beat you or abuse you in some kind of way, that is love. They are teaching you tough love, right? But what they don't also teach us is how to heal from this tough love. So when it comes to response, for me, I always say I wish we would get to a point where we would not have to advocate for all these things, right? But then it doesn't look like we are going to get there. So when it comes to response, I think we as organizational leaders, community members, we should know better. That's what I would say again. We should know better. We should know this is wrong. We can start from there. We should know that if you're speaking with someone and you feel you have anger issues, and the next thing you are going to raise your hand, you need to back up. Let the person know I don't want to have this conversation now. Maybe later on we can come back to this conversation, right? And also when in response to a person, you can also listen. Sometimes just listen. Sometimes we find ourselves giving advice where it's not really needed. Sometimes you can just listen to the person, right? Let them know, create a safe space around you for them, right? Create a safe space around you for them. Let them know that anytime they come to you, your place or when they call you, you are a safe space for them. Let them understand that it's not their fault, because sometimes our egoistics makes us even blame victims. We activists that we are supposed to know better, sometimes our egoistic state makes us blame victims. Why did you do this now? You know that this is how this person is. Instead of tackling what the person did, it's wrong. Because if two people are having argument, confrontation, whatever it is, and then one person is always the one raising their hands, which means there is a problem. The person always raising their hands needs to work on what the problem is. They need to find out what is the reason why they feel it's okay to always raise their hands, right? So for me, in response, I would say we need to do better. We need to start working on ourselves. We need to start healing our childhood trauma. We need to get to the point where we will understand that the fact that my daddy beat me when I was a child doesn't mean it's okay for me to beat another person or hit another person. It actually even means I need to be a better person and stand in for people so that they will not have to go through what I went through.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? And then I think we can get there. By doing that, we can get there. We can get to a place where we will know that as people, we are doing okay. And also, let's not forget, we are affirming each other. We are affirming each other, being there for each other, and not blaming victims. Sometimes it's our problem. We will not realize we are doing it, but we do it. Blaming victims. And also, it's okay to see a therapist. African children or Africans, we've been brought up to believe that we don't need therapists, but we do. We do. Because there are things in our childhood that still follows us into our adulthood, into womanhood. So we need it. We need therapy. We need to get to the point where we will say, I need therapy. I need to find out the root cause of this, why I feel it's okay to behave the way I behave. We need to get there. It's not laugh about it and then just go to bed. Because whatever triggered that behavior is going to come up again. So we need to get to the point where we will know that therapy is not a white person thing, quote and unquote. We need to get to the point where we say, I'm a Black woman, but I deserve therapy. I deserve to heal. I deserve to be better for another person. I deserve to be better for myself to begin with. Because when I'm better and good to myself, I am better and good for other people around me too.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think one key takeaway is the fact that, from what you said, is the fact that SGBV, GBV as a broad term, manifest in so many different ways, and it can be emotional, it can be psychological. It's not just, a lot of the times we tend to underrate microaggression and just focus on the macro one of physical violence, forgetting all the other forms of violence beyond just the physical violence and sexual violence. So thank you so much for sharing that. And yes, I totally agree that creating safe spaces, even for us as individuals, before going out there in the work we do, is also really important to ensure that victims feel safe enough to even speak out. My co-hosts are chefs. I don't know if comments are enabled for participants, so that for the audience, so that anybody who has questions can ask. Tawakalit, so one of the things I love about the work Chefs is doing is building holistic solutions. That means also paying attention to what allyship can achieve in the kind of society we find ourselves in. Because I mean, we are all in this society together. We are all fighting GBV together. That means we need to work together for holistic solutions to ensure that GBV is a thing of the past. Because if the mainstream women's rights organization or feminist spaces are doing it in isolation with exclusionary tendencies, then GBV will never be a thing of the past. If we are doing doing us as an order for the queer community, also because we are being marginalized, it would still not be a thing of the past. So what are as someone with experience, what are the ways we can try to build more partnerships between mainstream women's rights organizations or other organizations working around SGBV and LBQTI+ organizations, to see if we can bridge that gap around our interventions and response?
See, I'm very glad that you asked that question, Marlene, because I find that even within the sector, a lot of us, we've not dealt with our own traumas and our own inadequacies, right? So we have these conversations and then we go back to our different organizations. And then when we have workshops or we have stakeholders meetings or we have engagements, we invite just organizations like ours or just people that we align with in terms of our identity and our beliefs. And if we continue to do that, then obviously we're never going to bridge the gap, just like you said. We're going to continue to speak in silos with people who already understand the things that we're going to say. So it's like, for example, chefs organizing an event or a stakeholders workshop and then inviting just people who work with groups that are focused on LGBTQI plus persons. Then it's preaching to the choir in that sense, because those people agree with everything that you're saying anyway. And it's one of the things that I really love about the work that TS, for example, does. Because I mean, I've been to, I don't know, 5 meetings that TS has organized in particular. And how do they do that? It's just reaching across the divide. So I feel like, first of all, we need to remember that ultimately we're all human beings, regardless of all our beliefs, that we all shit, we all eat, we all breathe, we all do the regular things that makes us people. Nobody's carrying a horn on their head. Because I think that when it comes to this conversation, we're afraid of each other. Maybe fear is not the right word, but it's like we're guarded around each other. So, for example, when we wanted to organize the design workshop, there were colleagues who were actually concerned about using the wrong language. Like, hey, if we invite these people and then I now go and misgender somebody, they'll now say that I'm homophobic. And I'm like, you know what? People understand that mistakes can be made as long as you're not trying deliberately to misidentify a person, right? People understand that, oh, this is new for a lot of people. So you might make mistakes. You make a mistake, they correct you correct yourself, and you keep it moving, you know. So I find that a lot of times, even with organizations that might seem like they don't want to engage, it's because they're afraid of saying the wrong thing. It's the thing I say about that silent majority. The silent majority does not have the right information. So it's like, you know what, let me just stay in the comfort zone that I am familiar with, that I know exactly what to say, I know exactly who to say to, and there is no chance that I'm going to be offensive because I've done this work for a lot of time. But when we talk about blending our organizations together, then across both divide, there's a lot of learning that needs to happen. And before that learning happens, it means that some of us are going to make mistakes. And a lot of people are afraid of that mistake because this is the age of Twitter, where people are very trigger happy, and in minutes somebody will go and post. Can you imagine? I was at a meeting with this organization and somebody does this, that, and then it's all messy. And I'm not saying this just off the top of my head. I've literally had conversations where people were afraid that their organization was going to be dragged or going to be portrayed in a bad light because they made a mistake or said something or did something or anything like that, right? I've been in meetings where people tell the press organizations that, oh, please don't quote this particular organization. It's not like we're trying to be exclusionary, but we just don't want the negative attention that it brings. Now, we don't say these things to each other outside, right? We just keep it in our mind and then we talk about surface things. Again, because we don't want to be offensive. But if we don't say the truth, even the one that might sound offensive, then how in God's name are we going to begin to tackle these issues that we have and, you know, just find solutions? So when I was with an organization called Invictus Africa, we did a directory of gender-based violence responders across the 36 states of Nigeria. It's called Orange Pages, right? So Orange Pages is like, it has the contact information, address, and all of that of different organizations across all Nigerian states. So I feel like maybe when we want to organize design workshops or stakeholders meetings or things like that, let's look through the directories that exist. Let's speak to our people. You know, I'm trying to have a conversation. Who should I be inviting? And I want to be inclusive. Sometimes it's as simple as just asking a question. I mean, it's like we have, a lot of us have different circles, right? So we have circles of people that, oh, we just talk about just work, strictly work, nothing else. We have friends for Jaye, we want to enjoy life. Those are our friends. We don't talk about work with them because that's not what brings us together. So we all have those pockets of circles in our lives. So how about we leverage on these different pockets when it comes to movement building and coming together? Even if because I mean, I'm sure that there are some people in Nigeria who work within the women's rights sector that don't even know that there are organizations in Nigeria that are focused on LGBTQI rights. I'm extremely certain. I'm very certain. Which means that when they want to have events, even if they're trying to be inclusive, they have no idea where to start from. I mean, you don't even know that those organizations exist. How are you going to invite them? So I feel like let's start by leveraging on the different pockets of associations that we all have and say, oh, Marlene, I'm trying to organize an event for my organization and I would like to ensure that we're inclusive. Who should I be talking to? Who should I be inviting? Because that also elevates the kind of conversations that we're having. Because these different people will bring their own different perspectives from their work, from their lived experiences, and we're able to have better solutions, better outputs, and just move on better from there. And when we're also working together like that, we begin to see each other outside of the binaries that have clogged our minds and just start from the very basic premise that we're all human beings. And then we can build on that and just go from there.
True. Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing the directory. I also look forward to the document you will send for me to share across. I'm sure some persons will be interested.
Madam, please, before you go on, can I add a little to what my
please do.
I think about everything she said is true, but I think what also makes us separate ourselves from mainstream women organization mostly is, like she stated, one, being dragged on Twitter or on social media. Two, most of these people or most queer women have felt trauma through their families who are heterosexuals, right? And then most queer women, one way or the other, relate when it comes to women issues, they relate to heterosexual people. So it's like, they are now not coming to learn about them or want to know anything. It's not like they can't relate. Even lesbians will relate. A lesbian who has never dated a man will relate with a heterosexual woman. But then when we bring them in our space to have this intersectionality workshops with them, most of the time when you realize is that most of them, they are not interested. They don't want to know, right? And that one way or the other has a way of triggering other queer women or queer people in the space. So instead of us also trying to, it's okay, like let's take it one step at a time to bring them together all the time. What we do is that when we are having a workshop, we have a separate workshop for mainstream heterosexual women or organization, and then we have a different workshop for queer people, right? So that everybody will be in their safe spaces. Like, don't come and trigger me. This one, so also don't come and trigger me, because there is a set of people that says, I understand your issue. I know what you're going through as a woman. Even me as a woman dating another woman, I can tell you I go through similar. Right? And then there is another group of people that says, I can't relate. I don't know what you're talking about. You are dating your fellow woman. You not even have kids. How are you going to have kids? I don't understand. Even if you try to open their minds and put the knowledge in there for them to understand, there are these people that have decided, I'm not going to understand. I can't relate. So I think in our quest not to trigger anyone or for any organization to be dragged because one person said something and the other person didn't understand, we end up always having separate communities. When I think us coming together as women would have been beautiful, it would be powerful for our quest. We end up separating ourselves from each other. I think that's what I also want to add to what she said. Is the I don't know if it's fear.
Yeah, very, very.
I don't know what the word is, but then that's the thing that keeps pulling us away, because most of the time when you meet with them in a workshop at the same place to talk about, have conversation, conferences, you realize that if there is tension, and then there is the after talk too, that people will be mumbling like, I don't want to be in this space with this woman again. Like, she feels she's privileged because she's heterosexual and all of that. So I think that's the thing. That's the thing that separates us, right? That's the thing that separates us, and we need to find a common ground to come together. We need to really find a common ground to come together, because what happens in Nigeria, like she's saying, like similar happens in Ghana, where we can even be in the workshop with them or at conferences and all of us will decide to be quiet because it's not like they will even listen. You understand? But I think we need to find a common ground where we can actually work together, because we are not working against each other. We are working together, because if a queer woman is working outside and a man is going to attack her, The man is not going to attack her because she's queer, because he wouldn't even know, right? He's going to attack her because she is a woman. And then I think that is where we need to start from. We are women before our sexuality, before anything. So I think that is where we need to start from. Because if I go out as a queer woman, you understand, and a man, like I said, the man is not seeing a queer woman because there is nothing on my forehead, on my body that is screaming queer woman, right? Is a man just seeing a woman that he feels I'm powerful to abuse in any way, physically, sexually, or anything. So I think we should come together as women before anything else. That's what I wanted to add to what she said.
Thank you so much. And I quite agree that a lot of the times we if we removed our bias of who the person is, right, and look at what the problem is, we would be able to provide better solutions and be able to do the right thing without looking at who the person is, how they present, or where they are coming from. It's a lot of bias on learning, which we don't interrogate our biases a lot of the time, but it comes to fore, and also again propagates the narrative of otherness, like they should do their own thing, we should do our own thing. And like Tawakalit said, we keep working in silos with this. So I quite agree with both of you. I don't know if there's any question from the room. I don't know if there is any question. Okay, I don't think there is. Q&A is empty. So, all right. So just before we go, I think we have just 3 more minutes. Tawakalit, because also when we talk about having these conversations, education, advocacy, policy influencing, interventions, response to GBV, anything we do takes resources, right? And resourcing the movements with the way the landscape is at the moment, resourcing the feminist movements for GBV interventions, it is still ordered. It's like LGBTQI plus persons have to face their own kind of resources, resource mobilization space, and talk about it in their own context to be able to get the resources needed. Mainstream women's rights organizations have to do the same thing, and it still keeps reinforcing the fact that we work in silos. We were trying to get someone from the donor space in the room, but unfortunately they were quite busy and could not make it, because again, if we look at this holistically, it comes from there. I was on a grant decision panel recently, and one thing they did for that grant, it's a feminist grant, one thing they did was to ensure from the call itself, they ensured that everybody was aware that, hey, if you're a women's rights organization and you're applying for this, you have to be inclusive, because this is a grant for inclusive address of this problem. So it's like, as the donor, they ensure that, see, everybody who is going to get this money and program around this issue, everybody who is going to be resourced for this in all the countries, they have to be inclusive. So that on its own forces everybody to start looking at, okay, what have we been doing wrong? Which communities are we do we have exclusionary tendencies for? How do we become more inclusive? So like, what has that funding landscape been like, especially when you're working in the mainstream, Tawa? Are there opportunities for inclusive funding, or even in that resource mobilization space, there is also this need to conform to the binary system before you access resources? Like, how has that been, so we even know where the work is starting from?
Thank you very much, Marlene. I think that in an important way, you've answered a part of your question yourself. And I'll tell you, yes. So when you were speaking, you said that the grant review committee that you were on, they made it very clear in their call that if you want our money, you have to be somebody or an organization who is very respectful of human rights. So there, when we talk about GBV, I think about it as a three-pronged issue. There's the prevention aspect, ensuring that GBV does not even happen. There is the accountability aspect, ensuring that when abusers abuse somebody, there is just accountability for their crimes and that our legal system shows up in the way that it addresses that. Then there's the support angle in ensuring that, okay, once GBV has happened, survivors know that they are supported and they have access to resources that they need in order to face the experience.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of times you find that even in terms of resourcing, most organizations resource support more than any other part of the GBV response. So you have organizations that provide medical care, provide psychosocial support, but you don't have so many that are focused on ensuring that abusers end up in jail. You don't have so many that are focused on ensuring that abuse does not even happen in the first place. It's like most organizations are just looking at the same place. Okay, once the abuse happens here, you can get help. But how about ensuring that it doesn't happen? How about ensuring that abusers are not so comfortable because they know that there will be actual consequences for their crime? There was a doctor in Lagos recently, I'm assuming that you've heard about the case too, that raped his wife's niece.
Yeah.
The cancer doctor, exactly, and was sentenced to life imprisonment. And I know that a lot of men were very angry. It's like, how dare you sentence this man to life? We need more of those cases to make them angrier, so that the other abusers who are in darkness know that it's no longer business as usual and they'll be held accountable for their crimes. So in terms of resourcing, I think that the language needs to be very clear. Now, words for me are very, very important because words are not just words. I say that words are living, breathing things because they shape culture. They tell us how to think. They tell us who is worthy of human rights. They tell us who is worthy of our support. They tell us who is worthy of our condemnation. Even in terms of the very restrictive atmosphere that we have in our country and in much of the continent, think about it. Where does a lot of it come from? It's from language. It's from people employing language that criminalizes, language that others, language that minoritizes. And so when it comes to language, we need to actually face it squarely in terms of the power that language holds. So there's some changes that we can make on an individual level, but I think that especially when it comes to resourcing, because of the power imbalance that already exists, when we did the power mapping, I feel like the solution to this is one that is more structural than individual. So for this, it's not about individuals changing as much as it is us taking it to the systems, dismantling the current systems that exist, or at least modifying them in a way that makes them more inclusive. Because if a funder says that you don't get our money unless you're somebody who is inclusive and respects human rights, then people will sit up. And in short, I think that funders should even take it beyond that because people lie because of money. So it's not just you telling us, it's you showing us that truly you are inclusive. And you can do this, we can see this based on simple things like your footprint, your media, the work that you've already done, the language that you already employ in the work that you do. So it's not about just modifying your organization because of an opportunity that comes now. It's about showing us that truly, truly, you're an inclusive organization. So it's not that saying that these are the people that we'll give our money to. Because unfortunately or fortunately, money speaks. I mean, this is a capitalist system to the very extreme. And I'm not even glorifying it because I hate it, by the way. But as it is right now, at least before we make necessary changes to it, that is the system that we live in. And so it means that the people with money have the power. And so it is your responsibility to exact change on that particular sector. So for resourcing, I'd say that that's not an individual change or even an organizational change as much as it is a systemic change. And the change, the drive for the change has to come from the people who hold the most power in this situation. And that's the funders.
Completely agree. Because I remember one of the things I said when we were reviewing was the fact that even if these applications were in response to that criteria, I like the fact that it made them think, right? It started their conversations. It actually made people research if they were not, if it was unconscious bias, then now they are sitting up and they are talking about these things, researching and writing about them. Hopefully, it would also raise that conscious awareness for them to do a lot more beyond just, weaponizing it for funding and resources. Thank you so much. So I think we have a question. Okay, Ejura is asking, what are recommendations on intersecting conversation in feminist and and queer space as regards SGBV? How can we intersect conversations in feminist and queer spaces? So I think I'll just throw it open.
Okay, may I?
Yes, please.
Okay. So to just put it shortly, we have to be willing to take the chance that we will offend each other and annoy each other and give each other enough grace to realize when somebody's being deliberately harmful or when somebody just doesn't have the right information. So even in our language within the sector, we other each other a lot. And I know that a lot of times it's unconscious. So there's a lot of us and them. And then when we employ the language of us versus them, guess what that does? It pushes people to identify with their own team, quote unquote. So it's like if it's me versus you, then of course I want to be with my own people, people who understand me, that kind of stuff. So we have to get beyond, because I mean, it's like we're having these conversations under our breath and we're afraid to say things out loud because we're afraid of offending each other or not even offending each other as much as we're afraid of saying the wrong thing and potentially looking silly, right? But by doing that, we shy away from even learning. So there are people that are not learning at all just because they don't want to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. So there have to be organizations that are willing to start this, that are willing to bring this seemingly to different factions. Because just like Iris had mentioned, ultimately, especially for those of us who identify as women, ultimately we're just women, first of all. Like we're human beings before all of these things, right? And a lot of these issues, when you dig them down to their very, very atomical level, they affect all of us. Their expressions might be different. For example, if I, as a straight woman, goes to the police station, they will still harass me. They will still ask me useless questions about what were you doing there? Why did you go there? Oh yeah, you too. Wear this one, do this, do that. The harassment will still happen. Now, for you, it might have an additional layer in terms of there are other biases, but we're both going to be harassed anyway. So I feel like we need to create around the things that intersect us while making room for the things that we might feel divide us at this time. Because if we don't start at all, then the chasm is just going to grow wider and wider and wider. So we need organizations that are brave enough to first of all determine where the gaps are. So let's not just come into a room and then we're saying a lot of nothing because we don't even know what needs to be said. So let's ask questions. Let Chev create a form after this webinar and say that what do you think we need to have conversations around, like just in terms of this question, and leave it open and let people feel. And it's anonymous and people can share their ideas. They can share what they truly think. They can share the questions that they have. And then Chev can go through this link and say, okay, based on the answers that we have, these are answers that continue to recall across different groups and categories of people, and then let's tackle this one at a time and maybe even partner with another organization to do that. We have to start from somewhere and somebody has to be brave enough to open this conversation while knowing that we're human and we are currently at different levels of knowledge. So for example, when it comes to GBV, there are things that I will not tolerate from anybody. I don't care if you're not knowledgeable about it or not. There are things that you will say that will make me feel like you are just engaging in bad faith. But that's different from somebody who says something that is wrong. But I know, based on what they said and how they said it, that they're not trying to engage in bad faith or blame survivors. They just don't know. So we need to do the work of being able to categorize who is engaging in bad faith, who is just trying to be a bad actor, who is trying to be exclusive, as with this later categories of persons so that we can continue to move forward. Because as it is, imagine us coming together, my goodness. Imagine the resource would control. Imagine the power. Imagine the real estate on social media, in physical space. Imagine how we can leverage that to change the minimized laws that we have. But it has to start from somewhere, and it has to start with some people being brave enough to say, you know what, it's not going to be perfect, but we're just going to get this started anyway.
Iris.
Yeah, hello.
Yes, hi, we can hear you.
Yeah, I think my colleague has literally said everything. We need women who feminist queer women who be in the queer spaces and be like, yes, I want to be called the witch. I want to be called the bad woman. I want to be the
Yes,
one who is
yes.
not a wife material, and it's okay. We need women who will literally did what our ancestors did, right? Because when you are scared of the name calling, then that's the problem. Because being a feminist on its own is another problem, right? It's a whole issue on its own. So we need women who are grounded in their feminism, right? Who says, I am speaking on this issue and I'm speaking it. Whether you like it or not, I'm speaking it. Whether it's not going the way you want or not, I'm speaking it. And I'm standing on it. I'm not moving, right? Because I'm yet to hear any feminist who has not been called names. Even the ones who say, let's not say it in this way. Let's say it in a nice way so that people will understand. Even them have been called names. So if you are a radical feminist, obviously you are a bad woman, you are not a white material, you are a witch, you are a sex worker, a shower, like all these names are going to thrown at you. But we need these women because they are the women that make the movables shake, right? Because without those women, I don't think the movement is going to be there. Because mind you, even in our queer spaces, there are people who believe in patriarchy.
Yeah.
Even in our queer space, there are people who believe in the patriarchy. There are people who believe in toxic masculinity. Like yeah, they will stand boldly and say, and so what? Yeah, it happened. I mean, as a woman, there are people who believe as a woman, they will start their statement with as a woman. And if I'm in a space and you start your statement with as a woman, there's going to be a problem, right? But then it's also okay. It's also okay for there to be a problem because as a woman, what as a woman, what am I supposed to do, right? When I'm in a queer space and I'm talking about feminism, and then there are women who believe cooking is their best right. I say I agree with them. If you want to cook, that is fine. But I don't impose it on other women. Don't make the other woman who doesn't like cooking, because that's the truth. There are people who don't like cooking, not because they don't know how to cook. They don't like cooking. And whether we like it or not, me too. Whether we like it or not, cooking is a show. Like it's a hard show. It's a hard show. People get paid for cooking, and you're asking someone to go and do it for free labor, right? There is a difference between someone not knowing how to cook and someone who don't like cooking. So if you like cooking, your probably your love language is service, acts of service. You want to do all these things, do it. But then don't turn around and feel the other woman who doesn't want to do it is less of a woman, right? If you want to be submissive, please go ahead and be submissive. But then don't think that qualifies you to call out your fellow woman for not being a woman enough, right? So with everything my colleague said, everything, I'm not taking anything out, everything, we need people who will say, I'm starting, and for people to back them up. Not people who will say, I'm starting, and they will not have people to back them up. Because then even that also becomes a problem. When you're standing alone sometimes, even though you get seen and get hurt, you can be tired, and it can be draining. So we need all these women who have the fire, who are fierce, who are assertive, and they don't care, right? I always tell people, feminists are just born. Nobody just gets up one day and says, I'm a feminist, because it comes with its own labels that you are not ready for. So we need all these women. We need all of them in this space and in this time and in this world that we are right now. We need them.
Thank you so much. And I completely agree. We need audacity in the room for these conversations to even start and be sustained. Totally agree with that. Tawakalit, any last words from you?
First of all, thank you to you, Marlene, and to the entire team at Chefs for the invitation. Appreciate it and being in conversation with everyone here. Secondly, I'd like to say that let's remember that for all of us, a lot of times the individuals are not the enemy, the systems are. It's not me versus you, it's us versus the systems. Because even in cases where a person appears to lack knowledge and be exclusionary and all of that, when you dig down to the very foundation, it's usually based on the kind of information and education that they've been exposed to. But none of us can exist outside of the limits of the systems that we're surrounded by. Nobody. So, I mean, some of us try, we try to expand the systems, we try to expand the limits that the systems place on us. But for most people, not many people can exist outside the limits of the systems that they exist in. And the reality of the system that we exist in Nigeria currently means that a lot of people are wired to be exclusionary more than they are wired to be inclusionary. So, I mean, if a person is directly causing harm, please feel free to report them and take legal actions against them. But let's also recognize where a person is deliberately trying to cause harm or causing harm. For example, a person outing you, obviously, that's a horrible person that deserves the worst, right? But sometimes let's make allowance for people that just don't know. So it's not me versus you, it's both of us versus the system. So let's come together, let's educate ourselves and educate other people and elevate conversations where this are happening. I mean, when people say things like women don't support women, I really, really hate hearing that statement because a lot of us are products of the loves of our women.
Yes.
Right? If I ask everybody on this group, you probably have women who have moved mountains for you. They've come through with everything, with their time, with their resources, with their energy. There are people here that if you have a party, your friend comes days before and comes to do outgirl that you did not send her. Women love each other in a variety. Exactly. Women love each other in a variety of ways, but the systems continue to pit us against each other. And I really hate that we continue to allow them. Even the person who women are the ones holding them above water. When people say women support women, they will open their mouth and say it's true. She keep quiet there. What's true? It's not true, and you know it. But because that's what everybody is saying in that moment, that's what's popular in that moment. You jump on the bandwagon and say it's true. It's not true. We need to begin to challenge these thinkings wherever we find them. We need to elevate conversation. Let's stop having gutter conversations. Let's elevate the quality of conversations that we're having so we can elevate the quality of the outputs that we're able to extract from those conversations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's a lot to mull over and a lot of outputs to take from this meeting and re-strategize on how our approaches can be strengthened. So thank you so much, Iris. Thank you so much, Tawakalit, for coming to share your knowledge and experience with us. And thank you to everyone who joined. I want to believe this was a very relevant conversation for you, and it would be useful in any way it can be useful for us going forward. So thank you so much. And I think we've come to the end of the session. Yeah, so do have a really, really good rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you
everyone. Have a good afternoon.
All right, do take care.
All of
Bye.
You. Bye-bye.
Bye.